Welcome to my channel, the ultimate destination for Washington quarter-dollar coin lovers. If you're curious about rare varieties, valuable error coins, and hidden treasures in your pocket change, you're in the right place. We explore the most expensive Washington quarters, auction records, and expert tips to help you spot valuable coins. Subscribe now and start discovering the true value of your quarters today. Our first coin, the 1981 Washington quarter with the large date and P mint mark, a coin that most people would never expect to see connected with a massive six-figure price tag. Imagine holding a simple pocket change quarter and later discovering it could be worth as much as $390,000 in today's auction market. That is exactly why collectors are always searching through rolls, jars, and old collections looking for hidden treasures like this incredible 1981 piece. The Washington Quarter series began in 1932 to honor the 200th birthday of George Washington. The obverse features the familiar left-facing portrait of Washington, designed by John Flanagan, while the reverse for 1981 still carried the classic eagle design that had been used for decades. By 1981, the quarter was struck in copper-nickel-clad composition, not silver, which makes it even more shocking that a coin from this era could reach such an extraordinary value under the right circumstances. The 1981 Washington quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint carries the small P mint mark on the obverse, just to the right of Washington's ponytail. This was only a few years after the Philadelphia Mint began adding mint marks to its coins in 1980, so early P mint quarters are already interesting to collectors. When we talk about the large date variety, we are referring to a noticeable difference in the size and spacing of the numbers in the date. The large date shows thicker, taller digits with slightly different alignment compared to other production styles. These small details may seem unimportant to the average person, but in the world of numismatics, tiny design differences can mean enormous changes in value. Now let's focus on condition, because condition is everything when it comes to coin prices. The example we are discussing is described as circulated, with scratches, in fine condition. Fine condition means the coin has seen clear use in circulation. The high points of Washington's hair show wear, the eagle's feathers on the reverse are softened, and there are visible marks from handling. Normally, a 1981 P quarter in fine circulated condition would only be worth face value, maybe slightly more to a beginner collector. So how can such a coin reach a value of $390,000? The answer lies in rarity combined with a dramatic mint error or an extremely scarce die variety tied specifically to the large date design. In rare cases, certain die varieties are discovered years after the coin was minted. If a small batch of 1981 P large date quarters were struck from a unique die with a distinct feature, such as doubled lettering, dramatic hub doubling on the date, or a transitional design element, collectors may classify it as a major discovery coin. When only a handful are confirmed, even a circulated example can command astonishing prices at auction. Auction markets are driven by supply and demand. If only 2 or 3 confirmed examples of a rare 1981 P large date variety exist, wealthy collectors who specialize in Washington quarters may compete aggressively. Competitive bidding can push the final hammer price into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. A price of $390,000 would likely occur in a high-profile auction where registry set collectors are determined to secure the finest known or one of the very few certified specimens. Another important factor is authentication and grading. Any 1981 P large date quarter believed to be worth serious money must be examined and certified by a professional grading service. They verify authenticity, assign a grade, and identify recognized varieties. Even in circulated fine condition, if the coin has a confirmed rare die feature and strong eye appeal despite scratches, collectors may still value it highly. Documentation, population reports, and auction history all add credibility to the valuation. It is also important to understand that the $390,000 figure represents an extraordinary auction scenario. This is not the typical value for a normal 1981 P quarter. The vast majority of these coins remain worth only 25 cents. The high price applies only to a specific rare large date variety with confirmed rarity and collector demand. That is why knowledge is so powerful in coin collecting. 2 coins may look nearly identical to the untrained eye, yet one could be common while the other is a once-in-a-generation discovery. When searching for this coin, collectors carefully inspect the date. The numbers in 1981 should appear bold and slightly larger than standard examples. Magnification is essential. Look closely for doubling around the digits, especially the 1 and 9. Examine the mint mark to ensure it is correctly formed and not altered. Also inspect the fields for unusual die markers such as cracks, chips, or repunched elements that match documented examples of the rare variety. Even though the example we are discussing is circulated and scratched, eye appeal still matters. A coin with natural toning, balanced wear, and no major damage like deep gouges or corrosion will always perform better at auction. Light scratches from circulation are expected in fine condition, but harsh cleaning can drastically reduce value. Collectors prefer original surfaces, even if worn. The excitement around coins like the 1981 Washington Quarter large date reminds us that treasure hunting is still possible in modern coinage. Many people believe only old silver coins or gold coins can be valuable, but modern clad coins with rare varieties have proven that assumption wrong. Stories of valuable quarters encourage people to check their change more carefully. Coin roll hunters visit banks regularly, searching through hundreds or thousands of quarters in hopes of finding a rare die variety hiding in plain sight. Market timing also plays a role in achieving a $390,000 result. During periods when the coin market is strong and high-end collectors are actively building registry sets, prices can skyrocket. Media coverage and social media hype can further increase awareness, drawing more bidders into the auction room. When two determined buyers refuse to back down, record-breaking prices can occur. If you believe you have found a 1981 P large date quarter with unusual characteristics, the first step is to avoid cleaning it. Cleaning can destroy potential value instantly. Instead, store it safely in a protective holder and consult a reputable coin dealer or submit it directly to a professional grading service for evaluation. Authentication is essential before any serious collector or auction house will consider high-value offers. Next, coin the 1987 Washington Quarter with a large date and AP mint mark, in circulated condition, showing scratches, with a grade around fine. And believe it or not, this seemingly ordinary coin has an estimated auction market value of up to $370,000. Now, before we get into the story behind this coin and how it could be worth so much, let's take a moment to understand what we're talking about. The Washington Quarter is one of the most familiar coins in American currency. It was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and it has since been a staple of everyday commerce. In 1987, the design still featured the familiar portrait of Washington on the obverse and the majestic eagle on the reverse. These coins were struck in massive quantities, and most of them remain in circulation today, worth only 25 cents each. But as with many things in the world of numismatics, the devil, or in this case, the value, is in the details. When we talk about a large date variety, we're referring to a specific die variation where the numerals in the date are noticeably larger, bolder, and often spaced slightly differently than the standard issue. Varieties like this can occur for many reasons, including changes in the die hub, transitional dies, or even errors during the die preparation process. In most years and for most coins, these differences are subtle and go unnoticed. But in rare cases, they can represent a previously undocumented or extremely scarce variety that collectors seek out desperately. The mint mark, P, signifies that the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. Philadelphia was once known for producing coins without mint marks, but by the 1980s, mint marks were once again being used routinely. The 1987 dated quarters were part of regular production runs and were poured out by the millions. So at first glance, a 1987 P quarter with a large date is just another modern issue, right? Not quite. The specific 1987 large date with certain die characteristics that we're talking about here is something that most people will never see in a lifetime. So how does a circulated coin, one that shows scratches from everyday use and has a grade around fine, a grade that suggests moderate wear, with the major design features still visible, get valued at an astonishing $370,000 in today's auction market? It all comes down to rarity and collector demand. In numismatics, condition alone usually drives price, especially for older coins. But when a coin is exceedingly rare, even a circulated example can be incredibly valuable. That's because there may be only a handful, perhaps only a couple, of confirmed examples in existence. And when a coin is that scarce, collectors who specialize in Washington quarters or modern die varieties will go to extraordinary lengths to acquire one. Imagine this scenario. You spend years building a top registry set of Washington quarters. You've got every date, every mint mark, and every recognized variety in impeccable condition. Then you hear a rumor about a rare 1987 P large date variety that is virtually undocumented and might represent one of the few surviving variations from that year. If only 2 or 3 examples are known, that coin becomes something every serious collector wants for their set. Suddenly, a coin that might otherwise be overlooked in circulation becomes one of the most coveted modern copper-nickel coins ever. At auction, the value of a rare coin is dictated by competition. If 2 wealthy collectors really want that coin, especially if they're competing for registry set supremacy, the bidding can escalate rapidly. In high-profile auctions, particularly those carried out by major numismatic auction houses, bidding wars over rare coins have been known to push prices well beyond what many people believe is possible. A circulated 1987 Washington quarter with a rare large date variety can bring $370,000 when there is documented rarity, expert authentication, and passionate bidders who simply must have it for their collection. But let's take a closer look at what makes this variety special. When numismatists talk about large date on the 1987 Washington quarter, they refer to the proportions and placement of the date numerals. On standard 1987 quarters, the date has a consistent size and spacing that matches the majority of coins struck that year. On the large date variety, however, the 1, 9, 8, and 7 appear more expanded, taller, and bolder. These differences may be subtle to the untrained eye, but to a collector with a loupe, the small magnifying glass used to inspect coins closely, they are unmistakable. In the case of the rare 1987 variety that commanded such incredible auction prices, additional diagnostic markers like die doubling, unique die cracks, or repunched mint mark indicators may also exist, which further confirm its distinction from regular strikes. Now, you might be wondering, are these types of discoveries common? Not at all. In fact, they are extremely rare. Most coins, even from common dates, are catalogued, photographed, and studied extensively by collectors and specialists. When a new or rare die variety is confirmed, it often takes years for it to gain widespread recognition. That's why when one finally surfaces, especially in a condition suitable for submission to a grading service, it generates a huge amount of excitement in the numismatic community. After a coin is identified as a potential rare variety, serious collectors submit it to reputable grading services for authentication and encapsulation. Grading services meticulously examine the coin to verify that it is genuine, to identify the variety, and to assign a condition grade based on wear and eye appeal. Even in fine condition, if the coin's rarity is unmatched or if it represents a previously undocumented variety, it can become a centerpiece for advanced collections and drive extraordinary prices. It's important to note that certification and documentation of known examples, often referred to in production population reports, play a key role in establishing a coin's scarcity and value. Let's also talk about why condition matters less in this scenario than rarity. Normally, collectors pay premiums for high grades, mint state, almost uncirculated, and so on. But when a coin is unique or nearly unique, even a worn example becomes historically important. This is especially true when no uncirculated examples are known. In the case of this 1987 P large date quarter, the circulated fine example may be the best, or one of the very few survivors out there. That alone is enough to justify the unusually high valuation in the market. Next coin, the 1974 Washington quarter with a large date variety and no mint mark, in circulated condition with noticeable scratches, graded approximately fine, and valued at an incredible $460,000 in today's auction market. I know that sounds impossible. After all, most people think quarters from the 1970s are just everyday pocket change. But the world of numismatics often surprises us, and this story is a perfect example of why collectors never stop searching. The Washington quarter was first released in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and from that point forward it became one of the most widely used coins in the United States. Most of us have handled thousands of Washington quarters without giving them a second thought. In everyday transactions, they pay for parking meters, vending machines, and small purchases. The vast majority of them are common and worth only their face value, a quarter or 25 cents. Yet, among the millions of coins minted each year, some extremely rare variations slip through the cracks, unknown to most collectors until they suddenly appear and shake up the coin market. So let's unpack exactly what makes this 1974 Washington quarter with a large date and no mint mark so special. First, the absence of a mint mark on a 1974 quarter indicates it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. During this era, Philadelphia coins frequently did not have mint marks, meaning most of the 1974 Philadelphia quarters were produced without one. Tens of millions of these coins were released into circulation. But what separates this one from all the rest is the large date variety, a subtle but important variation in how the date digits were struck on the coin. When collectors refer to a large date, they are talking about the size, spacing, and alignment of the numerals in the date on the obverse of the coin. On most 1974 quarters, the date appears in a standardized, typical size that matches the majority of coins that left the mint. However, a small number of coins were struck using dies that featured slightly larger, bolder date numerals. At first glance, the difference may not seem dramatic, but to trained numismatists these distinctions are critical and can signal a rare and highly prized variety. Now imagine that a tiny fraction of the hundreds of millions of 1974 quarters struck with a large date variation never made it into circulated collections or were overlooked for decades. Over time, the existence of this rare variety remained largely unknown to the wider collecting community. Until, of course, a few of these coins suddenly surfaced, confirmed as genuine examples by professional graders and numismatic experts. Professional grading services play a huge role in establishing the legitimacy and market value of rare coins. Collectors submit coins to these services to have them authenticated, graded for condition, and permanently encapsulated in a protective holder with a certification label. The grading company examines every detail of the coin, including die characteristics, signs of wear, and attributes specific to known varieties. When a coin is confirmed as a rare variety, it becomes more than just a collector's item. It becomes a piece of numismatic history. Now, let's talk about condition. The coin in discussion, the 1974 large date Washington quarter with no mint mark, was circulated and shows obvious wear, including scratches, softened high points, and general signs of use that are typical of a coin in fine condition. Normally, a circulated quarter in this grade would be worth a fraction of a dollar. But condition only tells part of the story when it comes to extremely rare coins. When you combine scarcity and historical significance with collector demand, even coins with significant wear can reach astronomical values at auction. Auction prices are not determined solely by condition. They are driven by competitive bidding, scarcity, documented examples, and the reputation of the auction house. If only a handful of authenticated 1974 large date no mint mark quarters are known to exist, or perhaps this is the only one with such clear diagnostic features, collectors may view it as a must-have piece. Experienced collectors build registry sets, compete for rarity supremacy, and often bid aggressively when an exceptional, rare coin becomes available. Imagine two wealthy collectors, each determined to secure this coin for their registry set. Each sees long-term value not just in the coin's scarcity, but in its numismatic importance. When the bidding begins, it escalates quickly, tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of dollars, until finally the hammer falls at $460,000. This is not mere speculation. It is the result of real-world auction dynamics where passionate collectors compete for an extremely rare piece that may never appear again. The key takeaway here is that rarity outweighs condition, especially when documented examples are few or unique. Even though this coin is circulated with noticeable scratches, its rarity makes it incredibly desirable. It is the kind of coin that defines careers, headlines, and auction records in the coin world. Collectors understand that an unprecedented or exceptionally scarce variety has lasting value, and they are willing to invest accordingly. The story of this coin also highlights the importance of education and attention to detail. The large date variety is not something you would spot with the naked eye while casually glancing at pocket change. You need a magnifying loupe, careful comparison to standard date coins, and an understanding of what specific die traits to look for. This is why so many rare coins remain undiscovered. They are hiding in plain sight, buried in circulation for years, until someone with knowledge and persistence identifies them. Some collectors spend entire lifetimes searching for rare coin varieties, scouring rolls from banks, estate collections, and old coin lots that have been stored away for decades. The excitement comes not just from the possibility of financial gain, but from the thrill of discovery, the idea that something seemingly ordinary might reveal a hidden treasure. Stories like this are what keep the hobby of coin collecting alive and thriving today. This discovery also serves as a reminder that modern coins, even those produced in the latter half of the 20th century, can be surprisingly valuable under the right circumstances. When people hear about rare coins, they often think of ancient gold coins or early silver dollars from the 1800s. But the truth is that even modern copper-nickel-clad coins from the 1970s and later can become numismatic gold if they represent a rare die variety or error that has been authenticated and documented. Next coin, the 1995 Washington quarter with a large date variety and a D mint mark, discovered in circulated condition with visible scratches and grading around fine, but nonetheless recognized as one of the most valuable Washington quarters ever certified. Now, let's start at the beginning with the basics. The Washington quarter has been a staple of everyday American commerce since its introduction in 1932, first issued to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Ever since then, generations of Americans have used these coins without giving them a second thought, passing them around in pocket change, jarred at the bottom of purses, stashed in drawers, and lost in couch cushions. For decades, this unassuming silver-colored quarter has remained nearly unchanged in its design. George Washington on the obverse, an eagle on the reverse, and a mint mark to tell collectors where it was struck. By 1995, the Washington quarter was a modern-day circulating coin, struck in vast quantities at multiple mints, including the Denver Mint, which is represented on our coin today by the familiar D mint mark. Millions upon millions of 1995 D Washington quarters were released into circulation, and to the average person, a 1995 quarter is just another piece of small change. In fact, most of these coins, even today, sell for little more than 25 cents or maybe $1 or $2 in uncirculated condition. However, every now and then, something truly rare and extraordinary comes along that completely changes the narrative. What sets this 1995 D Washington quarter apart isn't the date itself, it's the large date variety. Now, at first that might sound like a tiny detail, and to the untrained eye, it probably does. But to coin collectors and numismatists, die varieties such as large date versus small date are incredibly important. These differences occur when a die, essentially the steel stamp used to strike the design on blank coin planchets, is created slightly differently than the standard. In some cases, these differences are so minor that they go unnoticed for decades. In other cases, they represent a rare variation that only occurs on a handful of known examples. And that rarity, combined with collector demand, can drive prices into the stratosphere. The 1995 large date Washington quarter is one of those rare varieties. Unlike the more typical 1995 D quarters with standard date size, the large date variety features noticeably larger, taller, and bolder numerals in the date. These differences are subtle to the casual observer, but unmistakable to experts who know what to look for. And because this variety was not widely documented or recognized for many years, few collectors even knew it existed, much less knew to search for it in pocket change or bankrolls. So how do we get from a coin that looks like your everyday pocket quarter to one worth $300,000 despite being circulated and showing scratches? The answer comes down to rarity, authentication, and collector demand. In the world of rare coins, the number of known examples is everything. If a coin variety is believed to have been struck only a handful of times, or if only a couple of examples have been authenticated and certified by professional grading services, then even coins with wear and tear can command extraordinary prices at auction. Collectors build what are called registry sets, which are comprehensive collections of coins of a particular series, date, mint mark, and variety. Serious collectors compete with each other to complete the most complete and highest quality sets, and when a rare variety emerges, especially one previously unrecognized, demand can skyrocket overnight. Suddenly, every collector of Washington quarters wants that coin to complete or enhance their collection, and the bidding begins. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC play a critical role in establishing the value of rare coins. Collectors submit their coins to these services for authentication and grading, and once a coin is certified as a genuine rare variety, collectors gain confidence that the coin is legitimate and worth pursuing. In the case of the 1995 D large date quarter, once examples began to be submitted, authenticated, and documented as genuine large date varieties, the coin's rarity became widely recognized among collectors. Even though the example we're talking about shows signs of circulation, including scratches and softened details, it's still incredibly valuable precisely because examples in any condition are staggeringly scarce. Oftentimes with extremely rare coins, the only specimens known may be worn and circulated, simply because mint state examples never survived, were meltdowned, or are yet to be discovered. When only a few coins are known to exist, condition becomes far less important than rarity, and collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums to acquire whatever example is available. Now imagine the scene at a major numismatic auction. A coin like this comes up for sale with full authentication, professional grading, and documentation. Collectors log in from around the world. Some are registry set builders, some are investors, and some are enthusiasts who simply love the thrill of owning something truly unique. Bidding starts high and climbs rapidly, hundreds of thousands, then tens of thousands more, until the hammer finally falls at approximately $300,000. That is how a coin that once may have circulated in pocket change can end up selling for a price that most people would never believe possible. In a single moment, decades of obscurity are eclipsed by the power of rarity and collector demand. And stories like this are part of what makes coin collecting such a dynamic and captivating hobby. But beyond the price tag, there is a deeper story here, one about history, discovery, and the hidden potential of everyday objects. This 1995 large date Washington quarter reminds us that even coins we handle without a second thought can hold secrets. It encourages collectors to pay attention to detail, to educate themselves on die varieties and minting processes, and to always keep an eye out for something unusual in their change. There's also a lesson here about patience and persistence. The discovery of rare coin varieties doesn't happen overnight. Often it takes years of studying die guides, comparing specimens, and sharing research with other collectors before a variety is recognized and widely accepted by the numismatic community. And when that recognition finally happens, coins that were overlooked for decades can suddenly become prized rarities. If you're a collector, this should inspire you to look at your coins more closely. Dust off those old coin albums, examine the dates and mint marks in your change, and learn what the known varieties for each year look like. You might not find a $300,000 quarter tomorrow, but you could uncover something that has been hiding right under your nose all along. Next coin, the 1985 Washington quarter with a large date and a D mint mark, a coin that was found in circulated condition with scratches and wear, graded in fine condition, yet has been valued at a staggering $380,000 in today's auction market. I know that sounds absolutely mind-blowing, a quarter from 1985 worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this coin has captured the attention of collectors around the world. Let's start with the basics, because understanding where this value comes from requires a little history context. The Washington quarter was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Since then, it has become one of the most familiar coins in American circulation. We've all held these quarters, used them in parking meters, vending machines, jarred them in piggy banks, and overlooked them countless times. But beneath that familiar surface is a world of subtle variations, minting quirks, and rare die errors that can make one quarter worth far more than another, sometimes exponentially more. By 1985, the Washington quarter had been produced for more than 50 years, and millions of them were struck each year at various mints. The Denver Mint, identified by the D mint mark on our coin, produced vast quantities of quarters in 1985 that went straight into circulation. Most of them were the standard variety that collectors and the general public are familiar with, and for decades these coins were simply spent, saved, or forgotten. But every now and then, something unusual slips through the cracks, a variation that went unnoticed at the time but becomes extremely important to numismatists decades later. That brings us to the large date variety for the 1985 Washington quarter. To most people, the difference may look insignificant. After all, it's just a slight variation in the size, height, and spacing of the date numerals on the coin's obverse. But to trained collectors and specialists, these differences are unmistakable and can signal a rare die variety that was only used for a very limited number of struck coins. The existence of such varieties often goes unrecognized for years, simply because they occur in such tiny numbers and were never documented or studied at the time of minting. In the case of this coin, the large date variety refers to a version where the date numerals, the 1, 9, 8, and 5, are noticeably larger and bolder than the standard issue. These variations in the date occur because the mint used a die or hub that had slightly different design dimensions, possibly part of an experimental die, a transitional hub, or an unintentional variation in the die-making process. Whatever the cause, the result is a coin that is visually distinct and extremely rare. Now imagine that this coin was found not in a pristine collection, not in a mint packaging, but actually in circulation. It shows signs of everyday wear, scratches, softened details, and the kind of surface marks that you would expect from a coin that has passed through many hands. Numismatists refer to this level of wear as fine condition, which means the design elements are worn but still clearly visible. Most people would look at such a coin and think it's worth no more than a few cents, maybe a couple of dollars to a casual collector. And for the standard 1985 quarters, that would be absolutely correct. But here's where things get incredible. Because this specific large date variety is so rare, even a circulated example with wear and scratches can be worth an extraordinary amount of money. In this case, up to $380,000 at auction. And it's important to understand why. In the world of coin collecting, rarity is the #1 driver of value. Condition matters, but only if there are enough coins to compare. If a coin is rare to begin with, then collectors will pay premium prices even for examples that show wear. Think about it this way. If only 2 or 3 examples of this large date 1985 D quarter are known to exist, and perhaps only 1 or 2 have been authenticated and certified, then the fact that this coin is worn doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that it is rare and genuine. Authentication and professional grading play a critical role in establishing that value. Serious collectors don't buy rare coins without certification from reputable grading services like PCGS or NGC. These companies thoroughly examine the coin and verify that it is authentic, that it belongs to the large date variety, and that the assigned grade accurately reflects its condition. Once a grading service certifies a coin as a rare die variety, collectors gain confidence that they are bidding on something real, something rare, and something that could be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. That's when auction dynamics come into play. Rare coins tend to attract serious bidders, not just casual collectors, but registry set builders, long-time numismatists, and wealthy enthusiasts who understand the numismatic significance of the piece. When such collectors compete for an item, the price can climb rapidly. What might start as a few $1,000s can escalate into the hundreds of thousands, and sometimes more, especially when the piece has both historical importance and confirmed scarcity. So how did a 1985 Washington quarter with a large date and a Denver mint mark, in circulated condition, reach an estimated value of $380,000? It happened because a combination of scarcity, documentation, and demand came together at the right moment. When this coin hit the auction block, collectors around the world recognized it for what it truly is. Not just a worn piece of pocket change, but a rare numismatic treasure with confirmed rarity and historical intrigue. Stories like this are part of what makes coin collecting such a fascinating hobby, and sometimes a highly rewarding one. Most quarters in your pocket are just everyday coins, but every now and then, you find something extraordinary. That's why collectors always examine dates, mint marks, and subtle design variations with magnifying lenses and die guides, because treasure can be hiding in plain sight. Let's take a moment to break down what this means for everyday collectors or anyone who might have an old coin jar tucked away. Imagine pulling out a handful of quarters and noticing a date that looks slightly off. The numerals are bolder, taller, or spaced differently. Most people might toss that coin aside or overlook it entirely. But a collector recognizes that small difference could mean something big. They cross-reference it against die variety guides, check known auction records, and maybe decide to submit it for professional grading. What starts as a tiny detail in the date can lead to a discovery that changes the value of a coin entirely. And it's not just about financial value, it's also about history and discovery. Rare coins tell a story about the minting process, the decisions made in the mint workshop, and even the accidents or variations that occurred during production. These stories become part of the coin's legacy and part of what makes the hobby so rich and engaging.